today's beading lesson, I promised you some tips about using memory wire in a different way. So take a look at this choker necklace. It is the omega or collar style. It has bolo over the memory wire so that it wraps around the back of the neck. And then the ends are dangling down the front. Now this is a totally different way of using the necklace size of memory wire. You might be a little more familiar with using memory wire for bracelets. So if you take a look at the coiled bracelet, this is, the ordinary style that you would expect to see, just with tons and tons of loops. And that actually makes up really quickly if you use pre-mixes of seed beads. But to get started, let's work on our memory wire collar. So what I'm going to use is some flat memory wire, and you can use the round kind as well, but I like the flat one for this project because it's just a little bit easier to get it through the bolo cord itself. And the first thing you'll do is cut your piece of memory wire, and you just normally when I would make a memory wire choker, I would cut it with 1.5 loops like this. For this piece, I'm going to cut it a little bit shorter, so just a couple of inches of overlap here. And you want to be sure always to use your special memory wire cutter, because if you use regular cutters on this, it will take a little notch out of your cutter because it's made of stainless steel. Okay, so then to measure our leather, I'm using a large bolo cord, and bolo is made from different strands of flat braid, so it has a really smooth feel to it, and this one is made with natural dye, so it kind of has a variegated effect that I really like. So to measure it, what I'll do is just kind of hold it around so that I can get a pretty close sense for how long I want it to be. And then I'm just going to cut it a little bit shorter because we'll leave room for our loops. So just like 1/4 inch shorter than the end of my wire. I'm just using some heavy duty scissors for that. Okay, so our next step is to take our round nose or bail making pliers, or these are memory wire pliers. They have short tips here and they have 2 different sizes of cylinders. So I'm going to use the large one. That will help it fit through the leather without slipping inside once it's done. Oops. There we go. And just roll it over like that. So I have a nice perfect circle, and then you're ready to start threading it onto the leather. And this sometimes goes smoothly and sometimes is a little tricky. So if it gets tricky, you can also grasp your memory wire with pliers and force it through, but just beware not to make any dents or damages in the surface of your wire. So I just continue feeding this through until we get it all the way around. And I have one that I already prepared here, and you can see I have quite a bit of wire sticking out the end. I cut this one a tiny bit shorter. Doesn't matter, it's going to overlap either way. All right, so now what I'm going to do is just take my cutter and cut it to about a finger's width. Then take the large side of the memory wire pliers, again, roll it around so that you get a perfect circle. And you want it to be a pretty good sized circle so that it doesn't slip back inside. But now see how this wire is causing some pressure here on the braid? So now what we'll do is zip this up. And I'm going to use some thinner leather. This is 1.5 millimeter. And just cut a few inches here to give me something to work with. Now we're going to make a spiral knot. So to do that, what you do is start out with the leather laying in the same direction as your other cord. Then you just coil it over the top. Let's see. Like that. And then to fasten the knot, you're going to pass this back through the whole entire coil. And I just leave it loose enough so that you can get your tails all the way through. And then just gently pull from both sides, like that. So now I'm going to use my pliers to just massage this into shape here. So I'll pull this back so that my loop is exposed and pull my knot all the way over the leather. I just need this last loop to be a little bit looser here. And then I'll add a little drop of glue inside the knot too, and that will help hold it in place. So I move it out of the way, add a little bit of glue here, just a tiny bit is enough, and then I'll slide my still pretty loose knot over the top of the end and then pull this tight. Okay, so that's going to cinch it all together, and we'll let this dry, and then we'll cut this off. And I like for the knots to be directional, so you can see this one's smooth on the front. We'll just turn this one around, roll it around to the back. All right. So now I'm ready to add some elements here. I'm gonna trim up my leather cord. And we'll use some decorative chain and some beads to add our own flair. You can really make it your own style this way. But another thing that you can do if you don't feel like making all of your beaded chains is you can use a pre-made bracelet and just attach a clasp to each end. And then you could wear this as a multi-strand bracelet in the front, and then this collar would be hidden in the back of your neck. And this lobster clasp just clipped to each end like that to, you know, just give you a different interchangeable style. But if you want to make some beaded chains, I recommend starting out with a chain that has some decorative elements on it already. So I found this feather chain, and all you have to do to attach it at the top is open one of these links on the chain, or you could use a jump ring. Use your pliers to open it as if it were a jump ring to the side, and then connect this to one of your loops here at the front of the necklace. Slide it on, just like that. And we'll get our loop back into shape here. And then we'll add some wings. You want to make them evenly spaced across the surface of the chain. So I just want to make sure that that top link is really closed. You can see that there's a little bit of space. We'll wiggle it back together there. All right, so one chain on each side. And you could also open the memory wire loop, but I find that if you bend that back and forth a whole lot, you're hardening metal that's already pretty hard. So sometimes it wants to break. We'll go ahead and fasten our other side. Okay. So you have feathers on each side. Now, what I would recommend doing is, because this comes this way, that the feathers evenly spaced, I want to spread them out a little bit. So I'm just going to remove some of these from the links. And to do that, you just find the seam on your chain and open it up, and then replace them on the other side. So just as if it were a jump ring, you'll just open this and remove one, and then evenly attach them. Or, you know, you can leave some extra space. You could also use a couple of chains that have feathers on both, or you can go back and use jump rings to attach them all. So I would go ahead and attach a few over there. Now what you're going to do is make some beaded head pins. And this is a fun way to use all different kinds of colors. You can incorporate your favorites. I like using rondelles or rounds, and if they're faceted, then they add a little bit of sparkle too. I have a rhinestone rondelle and then just a daisy spacer here at the top. And you'll see I chose some spacers that have different metallic colors. So that's another way to kind of draw down the brown and the silver from the leather into the rest of the design, even though you're using some colorful beads. Of course, you could match your leather to the beads and use other colors as well, or you could use brown beads. So what I'll do now is just go through and attach some beads in between each set of wings. And for our round nose loop, I just like to grab here across with my bent nose pliers, and then I use my fingers to just coil this around and make our wrapped loop. Okay, and then when it's done, you can just come in with your wire cutter and trim it up. So you just continue adding some beads all along, and I like to add, you know, a few. And if you take a look at the one that I've done here with the mixed metallics, I use some metallic beads that are faceted, they're fire polished, so they have a little bit of that golden glow on one side. So they kind of roll around and bring the other metallic elements together too. Now, if you were just going to do a basic seed bead bracelet, then the way that you would get started is the same. You'll take your coil of bracelet wire, and some people who haven't used memory wire before always have a question about how to make it larger or smaller. And the truth is, really, it comes in the size that it is. It's already sized to fit your wrist or to fit around the neck. There's no way to really size it down other than to use beads to make it stand out a little bit. So if you're using seed beads, it's going to fit really closely on the wrist, just like the bracelet that is already done. It's going to be, you know, a tighter fit on the wrist.